This is Dr. Stephanie Wautier, and I am the host of Conversations with a Chiropractor. If you have been following along, then you know this is not a health how-to. Conversations with a Chiropractor is a fireside chat, a little bit like Tuesdays with Maury, a little bit like chicken soup for your soul. Sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and listen to this inspirational conversation. In this episode of Conversations with a Chiropractor, I sit down with two of my friends from elementary school, Michelle and Aileen. It's crazy to think that the three of us haven't been together for 25 years. Grab a cup of coffee and walk with us down the traversing roads of memory lane.
So I am so excited to be here with two of my friends from high school, Michelle and Aileen. And Aileen, I was just thinking of when we met kindergarten at Holy Name.
Yes.
And Michelle, we met in freshman year of high school.
Yeah, probably because of Key Club or something along those lines.
Yeah. It's funny, we just were talking about the fact that maybe we feel like we have missing memories, right? Memory gaps. And we talked a little bit about this tonight at Ravinia.
I think I purposely missed stuff. I can see pictures in my head. I forget a lot of things. I'm like, oh, I don't remember. Like, I remember going to prom, or I don't remember who was there. I don't remember what exactly happened. I feel like a lot of stuff was snapshots.
Yeah.
And I think as I'm getting older, it gets more so. Yeah. And
less like of a
vivid.
movie.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Al told me that he found, apparently we were all hanging out at his house. And it was like us, and it was like Pete Amel and Sherry Amel, and there were a bunch of us hanging out at his house. And I guess he had been videotaping.
No, the videotape is from me. I have that videotape.
Oh, you have it.
Yes, he asked for it from my mom. I have that videotape.
I have no recollection of this whatsoever. Is it when we were writing research papers or something?
I don't know, but we were singing on the corner. There's a video of us singing More Than Words on the corner next to his house.
Was
My
I?
recollection.
I don't think I was there.
Yeah. So, case in point, zero recollection, and it was such this profound thing that there's a videotape floating around. And he said him and his kids watched it, and his kids were fascinated like it was the real world or something. Real world 1990.
Right.
And they sat there just watching it and talking about all this. And I was like, dude, I have no memory of.
Do you know what the one, when we were living together, Michelle,
Mm-hmm.
I remember washing my car the one day, my father having the heart attack, and the next day it snowed. And there were two pictures one day after the other. And I can see, I don't know where those pictures are, but I can see those pictures in my head. And I remember us washing my car. And then it's snowing.
I remember the snow, and I remember the heart attack. And I remember trying to figure out how to use your dad's snowblower because he wasn't there to snowblow. So I figured out how to use this snowblower by the grace of God. I didn't cut a foot off or whatever. And I remember not being at school when you and your mom came to the school to get me to tell me that your dad had had a heart attack, and I had skipped band that day. And I think you had gone in and said, hey, I need to, or I'd like to see Michelle or something. And Mr. Chung was like, so would I. She's never here or something like that. But snapshots.
And like how traumatic for your dad to have a heart attack your senior year of high school. So why was Michelle living with you your senior year of high school?
Mm-hmm.
Tell the story.
My parents divorced when I was really little, 5 or something like that. My dad was kind of that in and out kind of dad. So my mom remarried, and my stepfather, there was some arrangement with the Stitchman family where he either was co-owner or something of an electronics store. But anyway, it all went south at some point. I guess the store was closing, so he got a different job in Virginia. And so my mom was moving to Virginia to be with him, and I was like, I'm not leaving my senior year of high school. It was like January of 1991. We had, 5 months left of school, and I was like, this is the only place I've ever been with all of the people I've been with literally since kindergarten, or the fully name integration with the public school kids in 9th grade. And so it was like, solution, where's she going to go? And I was like, well,
We would have had you at our house, but there was already 5 of us.
well, I think the other option was the Dashnaws, because my mom was really good friends with Sandy Dashnaw. Brad was just a year older than me. And so for whatever reason, they were like, well, maybe not such a great idea to have an 18-year-old, even though we were like brother and sister. Yeah. But for whatever reason, it landed on Eileen's parents said yes, and so I moved.
You became part of the Carbonell family.
Everybody's part of the Carbonell family.
I'm a Carbonell.
And once you're a Carbonell kid, that's it. You're just a Carbonell kid.
Let's talk about your parents, Aileen. Tell us how they arrived in Escanaba.
So back in all the Vietnam vets were coming back from the war and having babies. And because Catholic schools were so big, all these babies were starting to go to Catholic schools, and there was a teacher shortage. So all the Catholic principals, and there was a decision made that they were going to try and recruit teachers in English-speaking countries. And my grandmother was actually recruited first, and then my mother was recruited, and they were recruited by St. Thomas School to teach. I actually saw that, the contract. They paid for the airfare for my grandmother, my mother to come. And then every time they got paid, there was like a deduction to pay back their airfare.
Wow.
Yeah, they were making something like $8,000 a year was their salary at the time
And they came from the Philippines.
to Escanaba.
And your mom and dad were married?
So they got married on a dare.
No,
Yes. So my mom and dad were married on a dare. My grandmother died not knowing they were married before they were actually married. My mom was going to leave for the United States, and my dad was like, oh, come on. I have a bag of money. Let's go see my brother-in-law, who is a mayor, who can marry us. And she's, okay, fine. And they got married by the Justice of Peace, who was my uncle.
But I've seen their wedding picture.
They were separated for 2 years. Then she left for Escanaba. My grandmother and all her sisters, because apparently my dad was like somewhat of a gigolo. They were like, you need to come back and marry him, like through letters and things. My mom finally came back and they got married. And they got married 2 more times, once in the Methodist church and once in the Catholic church.
Wow.
So they were married three times.
They've had a lot of weddings.
Yeah.
And then they just celebrated their 50th?
More than that. It were 53.
Wow.
1970 they got married.
That is really
The
cool.
official marriage, 1970. Unofficially, 1968.
And so when your mom and your grandma came to Escanaba, were they the only Filipinos?
We were the only Filipinos in Escanaba for years until Oma and her family came.
What was that like for you?
I really hated that all the baby dolls were like stupid blonde, blue-eyed baby dolls. That really bothered me. So that's why I always had like African-American baby dolls, because that was the closest. Nothing against blonde, blue eyes, but
We're still saying this like literally 50 years later. The latest Star Wars movie, when people are like, finally, I see someone that looks like me, or I hear someone that has an accent
Crazy
like
Rich
me.
Asian, Moana.
But you know, it's different now because of the internet too, right? So you can see those things more readily. When your scope is limited for whatever reason,
And it wasn't Escanaba.
and Escanaba is very limited, it's different. But I don't think I ever saw myself as different.
See, and that's what I was saying. I can look at you and it registers to me that you have brown eyes, that you have, back then was all black hair. It registers, yet I never saw you as different. I
Right.
saw you as my friend Aileen.
I don't think I did either. I really don't. I knew that your parents were super uber classy. And to this day, and your mom is intimidating. I mean, she was my teacher. I know people see her in the grocery store and they still cower a little bit. Because she has such a presence about her. And your dad, too. A beautiful, put together, classy couple is what I think about when I think about your parents. So going back to that day of your dad's heart attack, had he been shoveling?
Like he was at his desk, literally in the
the bank, and he told them, call an ambulance because I'm having a heart attack. I
Right.
remember that.
And he also said to call my uncle, Tito Gita.
Call your mom.
Yeah, you call these people.
Yeah.
So literally at that time, because of where medicine was, the only reason my dad survived was because Tito Gita was his doctor. So the medicine that my dad got, it wasn't something that was typically given. And it was like a $10,000 medicine.
Mm-hmm.
But Tito
bet it was,
Gita said, you give it to him. This is what you give him.
I wonder if it was like a clot busting medicine.
I don't know what it was.
So Tito means uncle,
Yeah.
right? And so you had an uncle who was
Our doctor and an internist. I didn't
in
know-
Escanaba.
in Escanaba. So Dr. Gita Vaidya and Teresita Go. They were the first people that I also knew that were both doctors and married and both had different names.
That's profound.
Yeah. And I didn't know that I thought it was an Asian thing. People that were Asian didn't have somebody that they were related to, like friend related to. You didn't know your doctor, but you mean you didn't go over to dinner with their family.
And like someone like me, who my mom had a lot of health struggles, and like doctors were people in maybe criminal type people. Literally, what a different perspective. Absolutely. Absolutely. Not criminal, but definitely not real humans or approachable.
Yeah, see, I just didn't. I always just thought you called somebody, like you called your aunt. What needs to happen? I didn't know that you had to go to the doctor.
Well, I don't remember. I remember maybe going to the doctor maybe 3 times growing up because I broke my leg. It was a sledding accident at Ludington Park. My brother and I were there by ourselves. I was 5 and my brother was 8. And we were there with some of our friends and pulled my hat down because I didn't want snow in my face. And we hit a tree and I busted my right kneecap. My mom said my brother stayed there at the park, but he told a guy who happened to see it happen, and a gentleman, whatever, oh, that's my sister. You can just take her home, and gave him the address. And my mom said this guy knocked on the door holding her daughter. And I don't remember any of that. And I don't think I was knocked out that long, but I don't remember getting home. So she had me thinking it was just Bruce walking on a broken leg for a couple of days before she finally realized, oh, I need to take her to the hospital. And had a broken leg. But that's one time I remember going. I remember them teaching me how to use crutches because there was like a wood block thing that would mimic stairs and they were trying to teach me how to use them. And then I think I remember going to Doctor's Park like once, ever, as a kid. And my kids are at the doctor 25 friggin' times a year.
But do you think that's the timing?
I think it was just the difference between Gen X and now the fact that there's this expectation that we take our kids for any little thing. Oh, take them to the doctor. And even school pushes that. Well, have they seen the doctor? I'm like, no, they haven't seen the doctor. They need to have a doctor's note or whatever. I think the expectation now is that we take them to the doctor.
I just think that growing up in the UP so right now, would you ever say to a 5 and 8-year-old, sure,
go to the park and go by yourself? Right.
You know what I mean? That's something,
for sure.
That's something that's very apparent in
I feel like that was just a Gen X thing. We were the original latchkey kids, right? And I grew up in a different home than you did because my parents split when I was little. I was the child of a single parent for a short while, and then of a stepfather who had 0 interest in me as a kid because he had 4 daughters. What do you need another one for, right? I think just Gen X as kids, we just learned that get outside was you're outside most of the day playing in the woods, or because I lived outside of town where you guys lived in town. My house was surrounded by woods and stuff like that. So my earliest friend was Patty Props. And we would literally go outside in the morning and we would play wild horses and literally we would be outside all day. And we would go in when we were hungry, when we had to go to the bathroom, or when it was getting dark and we knew it was time to be at the dinner table or whatever.
We lived in town and we played outside a lot. I do have
Memories,
memories.
houses, and no, why the hell?
They think we had to stay on the city block if we were playing. Like we used to play a game called Ditch It, basically hide and seek. Oh, and I can't remember his name. Eric something. He was
you.
Yes. 2 doors down. And the Stachulowskises were on my block.
Oh, yeah.
They never played with us. I don't know why.
See, on our block, everybody was a girl. Everybody except for Tommy Quinn and Kelly Quinn. And we'd be like, it's the boys.
Because it was Shane and it was Joanna and
Yes.
Chrissy.
And Emily, Kathy, Carrie Molesky.
Oh my gosh, they were all on your block?
Yes. They were one block down. And then the Smiths, Shannon Smith and Jessica Smith.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't play with us as much. And then Tracy Wannick and Jeff Wannick, but he was littler, so we didn't count him. Our block was run by girls.
Wow.
Everybody had girls.
So when you were young, did you play a lot with them? Would you go to each other's homes?
We're in and out. And everybody, and I remember getting in trouble a couple times from other people's parents, but dear God help you if you got in trouble from somebody else's parent. And then your parent was told, no good. And Filipinos don't yell at their kids in front of other kids, in front of other people. They just do that. And then that means you are so much trouble when you get home.
Yeah.
I'm not going to embarrass myself I'm not going to demean myself by yelling at you for what you've done, but you will know.
And so what did they do later? Did they discipline?
My sister would get talked to, but I got spanked. I clearly remember getting spanked. Mostly because I was mouthy, I know, because I didn't feel that what they were saying was right. Like, I remember my mom saying, because I'm your mom, that's why. And that's all you need to know. And I remember being a kid saying, when I have a kid, I'm going to actually explain why. So I really made a conscious choice to always explain. Even if you don't like it, I'm sorry you don't like it, but I'd at least like to give you the explanation of why.
I should backtrack from the ditch it, because that was when we lived on 7th Street, but we lived on 8th Street, right across the street from the Ginda. And this is a very poignant human for both of you, because both of you dated Alan Gindin.
Yeah.
Was the closest thing that I had to a brother. He lived across the street. My best memory is his mom made cake, and she would cut the tops off the cakes and come over and give us the scraps. Or we would go to her house and her strawberry kitchen. Oh my gosh.
And Sue's house always smelled like cake. Always. It was like woven into the fabric of their house.
Yeah.
And I visited her. Whenever I go home, I always make it a point to go and see her. But I went and saw her and I walked in and I was like, oh my gosh, it still smells the exact same in here as it always has.
It still smells like cake.
When I went there, it did.
Isn't that amazing?
So I think it's pretty amazing that the two of you could date the same guy and still be friends. Let's talk about that.
Well, but there's a long time between.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, tell my listeners.
I dated.
Tell the listeners about
Alan was my first love. I dated him first in 7th grade and then again in 9th grade for just a short amount of time in 9th grade. And I think at that point we were like, listen, we can be besties, but the dating thing isn't going to cut it. And then you started dating him in 11th or 10th?
10th, because 11th was Rex.
Oh, right.
I remember when the time in between.
Well, I remember when you and Al broke up because I remember we were at the park and I remember you kicked him. And he was really mad because it really hurt. So he was mad.
Why did we break up?
I don't remember that.
Why did I kick him?
And you were mad.
Oh,
It was hard. You were heartbroken. You kicked him in the shin.
You broke up with Aileen?
Really how it sounds.
no, but I love that I kicked him because if you're going to break up with me,
Yep.
I'm going to break your freaking leg.
Yep. You did. You kicked him in the shin and he was so mad because he's really hurt. And it just turned into where we're all friends because we all did the musicals together. It was such a small town and small school. We did everything together. We all went to football games on Friday nights. Like
We had movie marathons and just went from house to house to house.
Yep. 11th grade was Rex, really?
11th and 12th.
The Chicago Connect.
Yeah, so I met Rex at my cousin's 16th birthday
Lorraine.
party.
Mhm.
Yes, at Lorraine's birthday party.
And we
In
met the
in
Rod,
Chicago.
the
In
R's,
Chicago,
the
yes.
4 R's. I remember the first time they came to the UP because they stopped and took a picture at the Michigan sign in Marinette.
Right.
Yep, I remember the very first time they came up.
About that is like in our timeline, right between Landon and Nate.
It would be like Nate hopping in the car with his buddies.
And driving 6.5 hours to see a girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yep.
wouldn't happen.
We had a
Oh.
black.
I remember how your mom found out about the first time you guys.
Oh, yeah.
I just remember that it was a letter on the table because you were writing to Issa and you were telling her about it. Your mom read the letter and you were saying that she would read what you had invade your privacy.
Yeah.
I remember that.
That was the original invasion of privacy, reading a letter
Yeah.
that you were so stupid to leave on the table.
On the Karen pizza.
You know why?
And Issa was your exchange student. What year of high school was she with you?
She was a year behind us, wasn't she?
It was a year behind us, but I believe it was a summer between my 10th and 11th grade year.
Only in the summers?
Yes.
Huh. No, she went to school with us for a month, though. It wasn't
A month. Yeah, because she was on break still, and we weren't.
When was it? It was Isabel Alvarez
Vasquez.
That's good.
From what country?
Vigo, España.
España.
Yeah.
So you and Rex dated 11th grade, 12th grade.
We dated for 4 years. And then he just did something that I was not forgiving. And that was it.
He cheated.
No, wanted to join a gang. And I said no. And he said, we still actually talk about it now. They were like, I forget who asked, but somebody asked what happened. And decisions were made, and mistakes were made, and they were never forgiven. And he still talks about that. He named his daughter the name that we had chosen for our first kid together.
Did he join a gang?
Yes.
That, like a little Yooper girl from Escanaba, Michigan, to have your boyfriend say that he's going to join a gang in Chicago?
He didn't even say it. I found out because there was like, they would burn their arms. So he still has them, actually. There's 3 cigarette burns on their forearm.
What do you think made him want to join a gang?
He was very lost. We just couldn't keep him on track. It was that whole sense of community. So this year I went to, for the first time since I was like maybe 22, went to a restaurant that we were involved in a gang fight in like the freaking top of a restaurant where we weren't supposed to be having a party.
Oh my God.
And I remember seeing someone cut next to a CTA bus and me dragging my sister, because Emily was with me, dragging her out of this restaurant. And I was like, we got to go. We're going. She's like, no, I'm having fun. Because it was a dance party, right? The restaurant must have been owned by somebody, whoever was throwing the party, must have been their parents, whatever. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, if my sister gets jacked in the face or front at a party, my parents are never going to forgive me. So I remember dragging her out of this party. And I went there for the first time this year to have dim sum. And I was like, oh. And that was one of those things where I was just like,
Oh my God.
oh my gosh, I know this place.
And did you block that memory?
No, it was just a memory that was not spoken about. But while I was there, I was texting my sister. That's where I am. Yeah.
So you had Chicago connections. And so maybe you were a little more exposed to the world than Michelle or I, because you had family here and maybe you came here, and I don't know. Do you think you were?
One of the great things I think about Ed and Amy was that I remember even in conversations that we had while I lived there, where they would say things like, we wanted to make sure that our girls experienced a dinner in a 5-star restaurant or whatever, how many stars there are.
Right.
And that they got to experience the theater and stuff like that, because it's stuff that you couldn't do in Escanaba. So they made it a point when they were in Chicago to do exactly what you were talking about, expose them to more culture, expose them to more experiences that they couldn't get in Michigan.
Yeah, they would do all sorts of stuff
Right.
with us. So the etiquette, like eating etiquette, what spoons
fork
you
to use,
use,
yeah.
what fork do you use? You put your napkin on your lap. Who stands up? Who doesn't stand up?
I think I learned that from your mom about putting the napkin on my lap. I don't think I ever knew that before.
But so that was like table etiquette was a big deal at our house. So even with our kids now, with Landon and Anna, because they haven't been exposed to that, a lot of it. So even like when we were at the restaurant today and looking at Landon, and I can see his napkin, and I know he just needs like a little jogging, and I'd be like, and he's like, oh, it's because you don't want to drop stuff and look funny because it's in your lap.
Yeah.
When you stand up. So, and yeah, my parents did a lot of stuff, and we went to a lot of different places.
Michelle and I talked, I think, with this morning when you weren't with us, and talking about what were people's impressions of us. That was like my question. And I think that my impression of you was that you were wealthy and cultured. No,
Well, wealthy, maybe cultured, but not wealthy.
because your parents were always dressed to the nines, and your dad worked at a bank.
He was.
Okay, then well, it was. My memory serves me correctly. But I just felt like that you were all very poised.
And I think, too, when we look, knowing what we know now, looking back on it then, I have even more respect for your parents because you guys didn't live in a flashy house. It was a beautiful house, but for probably as much money as they made and or put away or whatever, they lived a humble life, a humble experience-based life, not a material-based life, right? So I grew up in a house that was not very nice, and therefore I feel like my whole life I had to have a nice house because I didn't when I was a kid. And so I never wanted to have my friends to my house because our house was gross. My stepdad would chain smoke. The house smelled. We had a dog that peed on the carpet a lot. And so I never wanted anybody at my house. I would always go to somebody else's. For me, that is something that has kind of driven me to, okay, well, I have to have nice furniture. I got to have some place where my kids' friends can come and play. My mom put in the pool, but I maintain the pool because it's a draw for the kids to come to our house. I've always wanted to be the house where the kids would go to hang out. And in order to do that, I've got to have a nice house. And I think we do a lot of experience-based stuff now. I think that's one of the things that is newer to me, dating the person that I am, because he's very experience-based. He'd much rather save, $20 or $100 on internet. And so that means using that $100, we can go to a football game or do whatever, right? But more experience-based stuff. And I think even their gifts and stuff like that have shifted through the years from like things to let's go do.
Absolutely.
Anyway, back to Eileen's parents. That a very much a fond, respectful memory or whatever you want to call it today. And your parents. One of many. But
I think that's also something that's very imprinted in me, in that I want you to have these experiences. I want you to do things. I want you to see things. Even if you see things that you don't like, at least now you know you don't like them, right?
Yeah.
Or try this out. My other big thing that I got from my parents, from my mother particularly, because my mother is she has a lot of phobias, right?
She does.
She is scared of heights. She cannot ride a bike. She cannot swim.
I never knew that.
So when I was a kid, she was like, okay, I don't know how to do these things, so my daughters are going to learn, right? I remember being scared of heights, and my mother also being she's terrified. So she would never, and my dad and Emily are the same, right? They're kind of the daredevils. They'll go do whatever. But I remember, because she was scared, I remember being more scared. And that was something that I just didn't want for Mia. So now I have an adrenaline junkie. Trust. We went the complete opposite way with her. But yeah, I was like, get your own phobias, kid. Don't be glomming on mine. Be original.
I think it's so interesting too, like when we're talking about our childhoods and so many of the things that we don't want to do that our parents did, and maybe some things that we do want to do that they did. Like one thing I will say, I didn't feel like we had a lot of money growing up, but my mom always made a big deal out of birthdays. she would make homemade signs out of paper, like copy paper. Look whose birthday it is. And she put it on the bathroom mirror, or Stephanie's 16 today. And that's something that I do for my kids on their birthdays. I make signs and I put them all over the house. And there's a lot that I don't want to do or don't do about how my parents raised me. But that's one thing that I bring from my mom that she did do that I think is really special.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting. Like, even just thinking about, I just thought your parents were so, I just remember your mother smiling. And I remember feeling like your father was very aloof.
Yeah.
Like, I knew who he was, but I didn't really, really know him. Know him as a person. I knew who he was. And I knew when we were at your house, we kind of stayed out of his way.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and through therapy and things, and I hope he's not listening. I don't think he will be. My dad was a dictator. That's the role that I think he played. And even several years ago, he is not about emotion, which was very difficult for me as a girl not to have a relationship with my dad because I really didn't.
And not just one, but 5 girls.
Yes. And I think to this day that I'm perhaps the only daughter who's not only stands up to him, but also says things like, that's not okay. That's inappropriate. Don't yell at me. This is my sort of, when we talked about we're not the same that we were, like, oh no, I was like the ethereal people pleaser. Like, how can I get attention from my parents who are busy with other children and busy making money and busy whatever? By being good. By what I'm going to do, you have 2 choices. You can act up or you can be good. Those are the ways that you get noticed. Those are the ways that you get rewarded, right? So I was going to be the good one. I was going to be the one who got the grades. I was going to be the one who was the cheerleader, like very much looking for any kind of anything from them. So not to get like emotional and deep, but there was a time in my life when I would say that I didn't feel loved by my parents. Like I felt like they were a unit and my sisters and I were a unit. We took care of each other and they took care of sort of themselves. That was kind of what I felt. Now, through the years, I can see my mom was diagnosed with MS when I was 10, and I had a 1-year-old sister, a 3-year-old sister, a 5-year-old sister. So, my dad's a small business owner. Times are tough. I can now see the struggles that they had. But the thing that I do differently as a parent is say things like, I really wish I could be there for this dinner, but I have to work and I'll be there at this time. Or, you know what? I was short-tempered and I say I'm sorry, and I'm a very over-verbal communicator. Like my 16-year-old son and I probably tell each other we love each other more than in my 50 years of life I've ever heard it from my parents.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't remember hearing that a lot.
So it's interesting that you say that my mom smiled and my dad was like, yeah, he was the dictator.
He was a handsome man. Your parents were very good looking, but I don't remember anything else about him in particular.
Well, there were the mothers like Marge Peterson, who was at everything, right? And she would crochet those little Kleenex boxes for all of us.
Well, Greg's son?
Yeah. And I don't want to be like, oh, what was me? But I used to think I just wish my parents would come. Like I wish they would be in the stand.
See,
But yeah.
I just don't like the only thing. And after my dad's heart attack, it was very crushing to me because they had made a point of coming to everything. My dad came, unless he was out of town for work, he came to everything. It didn't matter what we were doing. The man was there. And senior year, he was going to they had said that he could not go to our graduation and my final piano recital with Mrs. Chow. And I remember going up there and playing and crying because it was the first piano recital that he had ever missed. But then he was able to come to our graduation. But I just remember, oh my gosh, like really my last one? Why couldn't it have been like when I was 10?
Yeah.
But they were very present.
Yeah, they absolutely were. And very communicable. Like, you always had people over to your house. We always felt welcome. We talk about, smelling the rice cooking in the rice cooker.
Because my mom didn't trust anyone else, but to have her girls. Literally, that is the reason that she gave us. She didn't trust very many people to have her girls. So instead, she was just going to have everybody over to her house. So that way she could keep down everyone.
That's the mom I am. And
That's awesome.
they're like, come, like, no, you can't go there. But they come here. Michelle, what was your mom like? And what is she like?
What was she like? My mom was, I think she was a good mom, but she was so focused on literally like kind of putting food on the table, worked 3 jobs, like pretty much at least 2 or 3, like my entire childhood until they moved to Virginia. And so, but I remember her being at my basketball games. I remember her being at, like, she's volunteered at the library when I went to Pine Ridge School. So I remember her making an effort to do that. I will say that my mother and I are very close now. We've got that multi-generational house with my kids, myself, and my mom, and she's just a great person. My mom is super generous with her affection and with her, like, with baking, and she would give her shirt off her back for her friends, and she might think about if they're ever going to give their shirt back. Are they ever gonna And I'm the one who's like, when are you going to give my mom her shirt back? But anyway, she's super generous, and I think of when you're talking about things that you take from your parents and give to your kids. As my mom has gotten older and as we've gotten older, she's gotten a lot more affectionate. I do remember my mom when I was a kid saying that she loved me, but I didn't get any of that ever from my dad. My dad wasn't around much, but my mom would always write 143. It's something she would write in my cards, I love you, as far back as I can remember. And it's still something that she does today. So my mom's pretty amazing. She's a very young 70, whatever she is. She's really active with my kids. Her and Kara bake a lot. She's grandma that will run the kids wherever and kind of do whatever hey, grandma, can we? Sure. So she's a great grandma. And my stepfather hasn't been in the picture for years.
What about your biological dad?
And it's funny, one of the poignant conversations that I had with him was from your kitchen on the phone, where I was like, I think I just remember saying to him, like, why don't you care about me? What do I have to do to get you to love me? And him saying, well, I do love you. And I'm like, well, like, how would I ever know that? Like, he was never around, never whatever, moved a lot, was in Alaska, Washington State or something. And honestly, my younger brother had a baby. I don't even know when now. Gosh, 2000 or 2008. And I knew that she was going to have her on Monday. And I didn't hear from anybody for days. And I called and I'm like, what happened? What's going on? And my dad, I finally got a hold of him at work, like on Thursday or something. And I was like, what the heck happened? And they had found out that she had Down syndrome and they were trying to come to terms with that. They didn't know it before the baby was born. And I was like, why didn't anybody call me? And I don't know who had been called and who hadn't. I'm like, I'm his only sister, like, whatever. And I made a comment of something like, I made a comment about something like being hurt or whatever. And him going, you know what, I'll talk to you later. And I said, no, you won't. And that's the last time I've ever spoken to him. And that was the time where I was like 35 or 36 at the time. And I was like, holy crap, this has never been about me. This is about him and his lack of like emotional availability or whatever it is that he had. And from that point on, not whenever time since have I sought him out. I have not the approval, the why isn't my dad, blah, blah, blah. It was just for me. I was like, oh, done. And I've heard that he had a stroke, a really bad stroke a couple of years ago and everything. But I'm just like, sorry, bro. Like, I don't care. Like, it's just like news to me. It's not, there's nothing emotional about it to me anymore.
You healed from it.
Either that or just completely blocked it out. I think that realization when that all happened with my younger brother, and my stepmom was just a nasty woman a lot of the time. And there were some times where she was decent to me when I was older. But I remember as a kid not just hating going over there because, man, she was a screamer and a yeller, and it like would nothing about just hitting her own kids upside the head and stuff like that and calling them dumb. And so I didn't like being around her when I was a kid. And as a teenager, I put up with it. And then when her and my dad split, she would call me and rely on me as her emotional whatever, but it was never reciprocated, right? It was always kind of like this one-way street kind of thing. And so anyway, I didn't really care much for her anyway, just her personality in general, I think. But yeah, after that stuff happened, it's just like done.
So 15 years of not speaking to him,
However
give or
long,
take.
yeah, something like that. And it doesn't, I just don't, there's just nothing. Yeah, there's nothing.
Yeah.
But that's a super healthy, whatever your relationship is going to be, right? Because obviously my child has a father who is similar to that.
And as do my kids, all
Right.
3 of them.
Right. But you know what, though? As long as that is the realization that you come to on your terms and you're not made to come to it,
Right.
then it's fine. Like the biggest that Cindy and I and my father ever had was because Cindy and my dad expect Mia's relationship with her father to be the same as mine with my father and Cindy's with her father. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
And you cannot, and it's not fair for you to tell her that her relationship with her father is wrong.
Or that
Because-
it's her responsibility
Right.
in a relationship.
Right. Oh, and we would be like, and I'd be like, she will come to whatever conclusion she needs to come to. It's not your relationship. It's not for you to criticize. I don't want to hear a single word about anyone saying anything bad about him. He is who he is. He does what he does. She will be old enough at some point in her life to see that.
Right.
But it's not going to be because one of us tries to influence her.
Right.
You know?
And she's half him at the end of the day.
Right.
So when you do that negative stuff, which I try not to do with my kids, we've probably had that conversation a time or two, but ultimately that's half of their DNA.
Right.
So
It's so interesting that both you and Cindy have such great relationships with your dads.
I think that's one of the things that is very good for both of us. I think that's one of the reasons. And the fact that we're together, we have these great relationships with our fathers, but they don't want, neither of them ever want anything bad, nothing about Mia. No, you don't do that to their kid. You know what I mean?
They're very
So,
protective of her.
oh yeah. Oh yes. There's like,
Good.
and you will lay off because
Yeah.
I say so. And
Yeah. We want other people to have the same kinds of relationships or experiences that we have, right? Like your dad and Cindy's dad wanted Mia to have a relationship with her dad, like you guys have.
But he's a different person. Like, and that's not, and he's just not, she's not his priority. His priority is him and how what she does can make him look like, right?
The ego of the parent.
Right. And so like, you didn't even have anything, like you didn't help raise that girl at all. So
Yeah, you
can
can't take
shove it.
credit.
Right.
No credit is due you.
No, those brains came from my half of the family. Maybe you might get some of the athleticism, but very low. Her legs still look like mine.
Speaking of that, do you play the piano?
Sometimes. It's a piano's a very personal thing for me. You know what I mean? It's like my outlet.
Mhm.
So people be like, oh, will you play for us? I'm like, no, it's for me.
yeah. But you used to. We all used to stand around and sing Phantom of the Opera and Les Mis and whatever else we could think of.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my, I think, favorite memories of high school were gathered around your piano with Emily and whoever else was there.
Whoever else was out
Yeah.
there. Yeah, not for. And I think it's different now because I don't have Mia to accompany. I don't have my sister to accompany. I'm not really a singer, so it's different. So now when I play, it's the things I play are different, or if I play are different. And you'll be like, well, why don't you play? I'm like, I don't hear you playing your saxophone, so you shove it. When you get that sax out, you can tell me to play.
I'd get it out and put it around my neck just to have it.
She's an awesome saxophone.
Yeah?
Oh, really good. Like crazy good.
Does she ever still play?
Yes, I try to get her into, they say they have community bands and stuff. I'm like, you really should get into community band. You'd be really happy doing it. And you don't have time. Okay.
What do you do in your nowadays life with music?
Listen to it and sing along to the radio. That's literally it.
Do you do anything with your music?
What's really funny, so my daughter's a musician. She plays the piano and the ukulele and the violin. Violin is her sort of number one, and voice. In fact, she was in the highest level honors choir for the state of Michigan.
Wow.
She was one of 2 freshmen in the entire state.
Wow. That's really
Be
that's
there.
cool.
So we teased that we're going to start at the end.
Okay.
Yeah. We have some songs chosen. We ordered the music online.
I think all the families that are musical should get with their kids, and we should do like one of those Zoom, everybody plays something. That would be so fun.
We should.
still play anything though.
Do they sing?
Carol likes carrying a little tune to whatever, but Nate tried one year to play flute, and he picked the flute of all instruments, which I was really nervous about, but I was like, okay, he picked flute, but he really couldn't play the flute.
Flutes are really hard.
I played the flute, but only through 8th grade. And I think it was because there weren't enough credit hours in the day to do chorus. And
Yeah, there were, because I did it.
Did you?
Yeah.
I was told I was not allowed. Do you know that? I was not allowed to take any music classes in high school.
Really?
It was not academic, and I was not allowed.
But we were talking about that, Stephanie and I were earlier, that pretty much the entire time I knew you, it was a given that you were going into international business. And that was from, when I very first met you.
Yeah.
Through.
And then like I completely was like, okay, and then did something else.
Yeah.
Why? I don't know. Because I could.
Yeah. Well, and that just kind of goes along with you weren't allowed to do band. That's because you were going into international business.
Because it wasn't right.
Yeah.
It wasn't academic enough.
Right. And I think that I just like when I went to college pushed back against whatever. And they finally were just like, okay.
Were you the valedictorian? Did you have...
No, I was 13. My mom still is pissed about that.
It wasn't Robin, Miss Robin.
No.
Julie Carley.
Julie Carley.
Yes.
So my mom was so mad that I was 13 and I didn't make it into the top 10. So angry at me. And it was like, so have any of these other kids been the editor of the newspaper, the president of Key Club, done anything else? Nah. Like how many extracurriculars?
Julie Carley wasn't allowed to be in any of that stuff. Yeah.
But so they didn't have anything else, but I did all of these other things. Plus got to 13 out of 400 and something. Like, please.
What was our graduating class?
No, I think we were only like 243 or something.
Whatever. I don't know.
13 is something.
Still in the...
I was probably like 99.
475 or something was Mia's, I think.
I fell asleep every day. Why was I falling asleep?
Sneaking out in chemistry too. Such a necessary class for your future.
I know. Isn't it ironic?
Yeah, because didn't you take a couple of chemistry classes at community college in preparing to go to Homer because you had struggled or something?
Well,
like
not
that?
because I had struggled. Let's put this on the record.
Okay.
I was teasing. No, but really. So when I got my bachelor's of science in nursing, I didn't have to take as many chemistry classes as was required for chiropractic school. So then I took them at a community college because they would be easier. Yeah. But I never failed anything.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I was both a mediocre student. I was like AB.
Same. I would see like Robin and like Willa and Greg Peterson, all those guys like studying. And I was like, why they could be out having fun. Why are they studying? I didn't even learn to study until I was at Carthage.
Really?
Yeah, I never studied.
See, like my parents, I was always mad because my parents, because obviously Emily and I had very different learning styles. And I was mad because my mom was like, well, that's an A minus and that's just not good enough. And my sister would come home with a B minus or a C and they were like cheering that she didn't fail. Well, probably because she had ADHD as a kid. And like looking back, we laugh about it now. And we're like, we should have, you should have totally been diagnosed when you were.
Yeah, they didn't know what that was back then.
No, they didn't.
No.
And they were just excited that she could sit down for long enough to study. She was just like
Emily and the horses. I remember Emily and your mom getting in that car accident when they were coming back from horses because of a bee landing on Emily.
Right.
And your mom forgetting that she was driving to get the bee off of Emily.
Yes.
And in the car.
In their very first brand new car, the first car that they got that was brand new.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I remember that because it was out by my house.
Yeah.
Off Ben 35.
Do you know, I will tell you this story. So I think the first C that I ever got was in math in 8th grade. And my dad was lecturing me about my grades and how important my grades were and that I had to go to college. And I remember locking myself in the bathroom. I was like, just stop lecturing me. Just leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
So grades were very important in our house. But I still think I was like an A-B student.
I don't even know if my mom saw my report card all the time when I was growing up. I don't.
She was so focused on just trying to keep you fed.
Right. And clothes on the body type thing.
I think there's something spectacular about the children of single mothers who work so much. You become very self-driven, self-motivated. You don't hold anything against her. You don't hold it against her that she worked 3 jobs and wasn't there.
I learned my work ethic from my mom, for sure.
Yeah.
No.
I think it's very interesting.
My kids, I don't know that my kids are self-driven. Justice really struggled with school. Caitlin was a straight A student and self-motivated, but I got Caitlin when she was 13, so I don't know that I had a whole lot to do with that, and that was kind of already programmed in her. And then Justice was ADHD and is lucky he even graduated, I think, when it was all said and done. Nate is an okay student. He was like me. He would much rather hang out with his friends and do things that he's interested in. School is just, but he's pretty good. He's an A-B student.
I think that if he finds it,
I think this ignited.
If this is his thing, I think because they were so much, it's going to take a while. You've got to work. You always have to work. You always have to work.
So if you could tell your 17-year-old self something, what would it be?
So if I could tell my younger self something, I would tell myself to listen to what I wanted to do and ignore the fact that it makes your mother cry if it's really something that you want to do. If it was a job that you wanted to do. I wish they would have pushed me into the military or that they would have let me be a Chicago police officer. But I didn't. Specifically, I was on the 3rd round of getting into the CPD, and my mother cried that my brains were going to be splattered all over the city of Chicago streets. And so I didn't. Had I done it at that time, I would have been retired by now.
Yeah. What would I tell my 17-year-old self? Probably, and it's so funny that mine has a parental influence as well, but probably that you're good enough. Constantly seeking approval from this guy who was in and out of my life for so long. I think I made a lot of really bad decisions just like for relationships and stuff like that. And career-wise, my life has taken this really weird path because I've done just about everything. Oh, I was a massage therapist. Oh, I built tiny homes. Oh, I've been a customer service rep. Oh, I worked for an eye surgeon. I've done just some weird shit. And it kind of all comes back around now to what I do where I'm like, oh, I can see how I could draw on that skill or whatever. But I think from a personal perspective, I made a lot of really bad decisions just because it was like that, the daddy issues or seeking approval or whatever that kind of thing was. So, well, good enough. You're good enough. Just as a human being. You have worth just because you're a human.
Yeah.
But you don't need anybody else. You don't want them.
Right.
And if you don't want them in a certain time of your life, you don't need them.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
What about you, Stephanie?
I know that's a really hard question.
It is.
I think mine would be something to the effect of just stop worrying about what other people think of you. I love the Wayne Dyer quote that says, what other people think of you is none of your business. I think I was consumed with that.
Do you feel like you're less consumed now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, like, or subscribe? You can find me on social media at wautierwellness.com, Dr. Stephanie Wautier on Instagram, or Wautier Wellness Chiropractic and Massage on Facebook. And I'm so curious where your next conversation will take you.